start replacing the trailing arm bushing. We're going to have to take the trailing arm down, which is not a big deal, and I'm going to start with this bolt right here. It's a 13 millimeter nut and bolt, and this holds the parking brake cable in place. I'm holding the bolt on the back side with a 13 and using a 13 millimeter socket. Take this off, detach the bracket. For the trailing arm, I'm going to start by removing these two bolts here, 15 millimeter. There's one, and number two. And the third one's actually right at the front of the trailing arm mounting plate. Perfect. And then there are 3 bolts that bolt up to the knuckle. All 3 are 18 millimeter. Remove all those too. Ooh. And that's the third one. The trailing arm came down. Perfect. Grab it and pull it out. And this is the bushing that we're after. So let's get it onto a bench and remove this bracket so we can press the bushing out. Okay, now on my work table, I have this trailing arm with the bushing and the bracket. And I want to note that the bracket, the bottom of it right here, is actually parallel with the rest of the trailing arm. And it's important to note that because when you tighten up the new bushing into this bracket, you want to have it at the same exact positioning. Otherwise, your bushing is going to wear out prematurely from being under tension at the wrong time or the wrong amount. So this area here is parallel to this, and this one is parallel to this. So that's exactly how I'm going to put it back together. Now, with a 21 millimeter wrench, I'm going to hold the nut on the back side, and with a 21 millimeter socket, I'm going to remove this bolt. Pull that out. Your new bushing should have come with a new nut and bolt. If not, it's okay to reuse this one. Let's go press out this bushing. Now you can use a press or you can use a ball joint press like this, the big C-clamp with the cups. Whatever you have, whatever works. Sometimes you can also get a saw. You can cut into the bushing a couple slices and that'll release tension off the outer sleeve. Then you can press it through with a hammer. You can get creative with this, but basically what we have to do is drive it out. And I also want to note how much it's pressed in and which direction. So it looks like it doesn't have a direction, which is perfect. Sometimes it'll look different on one side than the other. But I will note that it is pressed through on one side about the width of my wrench. So when I press it back, I want to have it sticking out just a little bit more than the width of my wrench. So I have my setup here on the press. I have this cup that is larger than this bushing. I sprayed it down with rust penetrant. Hopefully that'll help. I'm going to set it down flat, and I have this old wheel bearing here that's going to act as a spacer, and another flat block so that I can have something for the press to press onto. Now with everything as centered as possible, let's go ahead and start pressing it out. Okay, I think I've reached the limit of that cup now. And I've changed my setup yet again. And there you go. There's the old bushing. Let's clean this area out and then install the new one. Back at the press, now that this is wiped down, on the new bushing, you'll see there's a line, and this line is actually really helpful because it tells you how far to press it in. So you'll notice there's a smaller part and a larger area. The larger area needs to get pressed down into here, and you need to line up this line with the edge of the trailing arm, and that's when you know it's in far enough. And one more thing I want to note is that these cutouts were at the top and the bottom of this trailing arm. Whether that matters or not, I don't know, but I'm going to put it in the same way that it came out. So I'm going to get my spacer situation all set up, bring the press down, everything is centered and ready to go. I'm going to start applying pressure. It's going down perfectly, nice and smooth. If for some reason it's not going smoothly, make sure it's all lined up and properly started, because if it starts at an angle, then it's not going to be good. So I'm going to go in about that much, and then I'll check it on the other side. So I actually went about 1/2 inch instead of 3/8 of an inch. So I'm gonna try to push it back just a little bit so that it's centered. Ideally, you'd want to get it right the first time. All right, so this is now at the perfect distance. You can see exactly where the line is. You can basically just see it here. It's lined up with the trailing arm. Let's get this back into the vehicle. To get it mounted, I'm going to have to install this plate first, put on the nut. This is the new supplied hardware. It's still the same size though, so that's good. And I remember that it was basically parallel with the trailing arm at the top and at the bottom. So right about there. Let's tighten it up. There's no way for me to torque this, so that's why I'm using just my air gun. Let's get this reattached. I'm going to line up the trailing arm with these 3 bolts first. All right, I'll torque them later. First, let's reattach the other end. I'm going to reattach it at the front first. Now for the 2 rear bolts, I'm going to put some upwards pressure on this trailing arm with a pole jack or a regular jack if you're on the floor. As you can see, they lined up pretty well. I'm going to put the bolts in, starting by hand. Now let's torque them all. Tighten all of these bolts to 81 foot-pounds, these front ones as well as the ones that go into the knuckle. That was the front one. Now I can release pressure and torque the rear. Again, still 81 foot-pounds. All right, now you can reattach this parking brake cable. Make sure that's nice and snug. Perfect. Now take it for a road test.